Hey guys, I just want to take a couple minutes today to talk to you a little bit about different types of microphones that you'll find here at CCU and what those microphones are used for. So basically all of the mics that we have here can be split into two different categories. They are condenser mics and dynamic microphones. And there's a few attributes that separate the two of them. So condenser mics are generally more sensitive. They use phantom power, or plus 48 volts, that you'll find on our console, but they're also a little more fragile, so they can't take as high SPL levels, and that simply means sound pressure levels. Inversely, you have dynamic microphones. Dynamic mics can take pretty high SPL. They are less sensitive, especially in the upper end frequencies, and they don't require phantom power, so that's what's kind of nice about those. We're super blessed here to have an array of different types of mics, so I'm just going to take a couple minutes to talk to you about the main ones that we're using here on like a week-to-week basis, so that way you know what you're looking at and how to use it. So first off, we're going to talk about the tried and true SM58. So these guys are used on stages all across the United States, probably the most popular microphone of all time. This is a dynamic mic used primarily on vocals. It's got a nice like 2K presence, which makes it a little difficult to use in our room, but overall, stellar mic. I really recommend using the 58 beta version that we have, which is denoted via this blue line. It's kind of got a different color casing and it says beta on it. If you look up online the difference, you'll find a few things that separates it from the stock 58. I'd encourage you to do that. So if I take the windscreen off here, you'll notice that it looks strikingly similar to a different mic that we have here, and that's because it's pretty much the exact same thing. A SM57 is the brother of the 58, and the only thing it is lacking is the cool windscreen. That bad boy is used pretty often on snare drums and electric guitar amplifiers, but can also be used on other things like cajones, bongos, things that have pretty high SPL, but it's got a decently flat frequency response to it, and it sounds killer, so we use it all kinds of places. Next up, we're going to talk a little bit about drums. I know I just said we use a 57 on snare drums. We're going to talk about bass drums, every engineer's favorite input to mess around with. We like to use a few different things here. I'd say one of the most popular is the Shure Beta 91A. This is actually a condenser microphone, which is weird, I know, considering I just said that condenser microphones usually don't take high SPL. But what's nice about this bad boy is he's pretty tough. You don't have to worry about harming him. But he has the detail and the higher end frequencies that a dynamic microphone doesn't. And it's super nice that you can put it inside the drum, actually. So you get a good balance of the click, like 3K sound coming from the beater, and a thump of like the 80 hertz fundamental frequency that is just like that low end smack. So we really like using it, especially if we're only going to use one line on the bass drum. Sometimes we'll use other things if we have multiple lines to run. For a more traditional approach, we'll take the Sennheiser E602, one of my favorite large diaphragm dynamic microphones. So this doesn't require phantom power. It takes a lot of SPL, and you see these in use. They've been using these guys for years. So I actually really like using this in tandem with another microphone, double micing the kick drum. If you'd like to learn a little bit more about how to double mic a kick, hit me up. I'd love to talk to you about it. But that's the tried and true old-fashioned way. Next up, we'll talk a little bit about toms. Here we like to use Sennheiser E604s. This is, for lack of a better way to explain it, a 57 that's a lot smaller on a clip that will mount to the side of a drum. So they have nearly the same frequency response as a 57. They sound pretty similar. They're dynamic microphones, but they're great because they're small, they're out of the way. You don't have to worry about smacking it with a mic or anything, or with a stick or anything like that. And they sound killer, awesome on toms. So yeah, those are the Sennheiser E604s. For overheads on the drum set, we like using the Shure SM81s, another super popular microphone from Shure. These things are hardy, man. You can golf with them, I don't know, but they're killer. So small diaphragm pencil condenser. I say that because the diaphragm is less than about 10 millimeters, and but phantom power is needed to use this mic. One thing I want to point out is this mic actually has a couple incorporated controls on the microphone itself. So if you take a look at it here, it actually has the ability to take -10 off of whatever is coming in, which is super nice. Along with that, we have the ability to use a low cut on the microphone itself. So all the way to the left, you have linear frequency response. In the middle, you have a slight low cut, and on the right, you have a pretty drastic low cut. Here, we like to keep it on the linear and do any of that low cutting that we're going to be doing from the console, but mess around with it. It's always fun to kind of see what it's doing, and oftentimes, these are not going to be picking up low end frequency, so it's not a big deal to use the low cut on them. They're also super useful on violins, other orchestral instruments like flute, piccolo, maybe acoustic guitar if it doesn't have a pickup, stuff like that. So awesome microphone as well. The last thing we're going to talk about very briefly is the Neumann KM184s that we have. Absolutely stellar, probably the nicest microphones we have. Pretty costly, be careful with them. These are phantom mics, phantom powered mics as well, condenser mics. They use phantom power. Crazy sensitive, very, very smooth in all frequency responses. If you're doing any kind of recording of like piano, violin, they're just like, they're incredible sounding. I also love them as drum overheads, as long as you're being very careful with them and not to harm them. They sound very smooth in a stereo pair. So that's about it for the mics that we have here at CCU. There are a few others in the closet. If you have questions about them specifically, please ask me. I'd love to talk to you about them more in depth. The main things to remember is we have dynamic and condenser. Be very careful with the condenser mics. All the dynamic mics, you just throw at people when you're mad at them. That's pretty much it. So hope this was helpful to you. If you have any questions pertaining to anything, please shoot me an email at tanner.daniels@ccuniversity.edu.